The Boy Slave and His Cruel Master. Long time ago in the land of Ochuko lived a warrior by the name Ononamba. It was in the era where bravery was counted an honor, actually a passage to greatness. Evil men do not ask, but forcefully take and intimidate their weaker opponent. The feared carried away wives and properties from their enemies without a blink of an eye. Weaklings were never spared. They were intimidated and disgraced at every given opportunity. It was a time when wickedness and treachery was at its peak. Those men feared no one or have reverence to tradition. They do as they like, and no one dares to bring them to account. It was a time of slavery too. Having a slave was considered an achievement by those warriors, a sign of wealth and fearlessness. And among those feared men was Ononamba. Ononamba was a great warrior in his time, a fearless one to be precise. His acts of bravery has never been disputed at any point in his life. He's wealthy, but most of what he had was ill-gotten and acquired out of greed and wickedness. He was one of those men that preyed on their rivals, taking their lands and wives by force. He was a slave owner too, a man that has continually desecrated the land. Talk of charm, he has no equal, and so he was greatly feared and avoided. In his time, to shoot and kill a lion was one of the greatest achievements of any title in their community, an Ogbuagu, lion killer. The title of an Ogbuagu is not for the weakling, and as expected, Ononamba was one. To be a true family of Ononamba, you must be brave. It's a grave sin in his household not to be one. Therefore, everyone in his family struggled not to be in his bad book. The warrior ruled his household with a strict hand. Weakness is not tolerated, and his word became a command. They have their views, but were only allowed to debate it among themselves whenever he's not around. Everyone felt the psychological pain that seems not to have an end. It's either you get used to it or it breaks you. His only son was among those that struggled to please his father. He finds fault with everything the young lad does, and so he was gradually breaking him. The slave, just like the entire family, was not spared either. But he stood his grounds and refused to be intimidated and silenced by the ill attitude of his master. The only close friend and family he has was Ononamba's only son, Ume. Eoha has gone through a lot in his life as a slave, and those horrible years that separated him from his true family has in a way toughened his skin, and so he became everything that his master wanted his son to become. Eoha became a young brave warrior in the making, to the horror of his master. It made him hate him the more, but the more the hate, the better the slave became. Eoha was born a slave in the family of Ononamba. His mother, a young fragile teenage girl, has passed away, leaving Eoha to the hands of fate when he was just a lad. She had relentlessly fought with all her will to stay alive for her poor son as she battled with the sickness that later claimed her life. If not for any other thing, gods of my ancestors, please spare my life for my son's sake. The young woman has kept muttering until she breathed her last. Death never listened to her plea of mercy. Nene, Eoha's young mother, was sold to Ononamba, a slave, when the father found out that she was with a child, out of wedlock. In those days, women are strictly nurtured and taught to preserve their dignity. The matrimonial bed cannot be defiled before marriage. It is an honor to the family of the girl, and therefore, to break such tradition is a taboo, a slap on their face, and it carries a grave consequences. When Neen's family found out that she's with a child, they were left no option than to sell her into slavery to preserve the family's honor. And that was how she was brought to the family, of a cruel man like Ononamba. Nen, right from the time she stepped into that family, has fought to stay alive. She was forced to do all kinds of manual labor that is not fit for a pregnant woman like her. She found barely enough to eat, both for herself and for her unborn child. The care that a woman in her condition deserves to keep her going was denied her, and at some point the stress was too much, and when sickness later struck after giving birth to her son, she didn't have enough immunity to fight it. The trauma she passed through as a result of her mistake did her more damage than the cruelty of her master. Anytime she sat and cast her mind on the day she was rejected by the family she loved, the day her own father sold her a freeborn into slavery, she will curse the day she was born. The cry of her dear mother has kept ringing in her ears throughout her life. Children, however they come, are from God. Forgive our daughter. She has kept wailing. On the long run, Nene could only conclude that it was her father that killed her. While she's yet alive, all these pains contributed in wrecking her apart before death finally dealt the final blow. After her death, Eoha grew in the hands of Onunamba's wives. The women took turn to take care of him. While a lad, she was lovely to behold, and the women did their best to see that he was kept from harm. The journey of him as a slave started the day he realized that his mother is never coming back, after he has waited in good faith months after her death to show up, which didn't happen. It was then that he understood that he's on his own and she's never coming back. Onunamba has continued in his evil ways, not giving a blink to what he does or how the people he has hurt felt, and life continues until one day, a day that has seemed like every other day, they have spent together. The two young lads had gone for hunting as usual. They've tried all they could to hunt down a game at least, and was about giving up when they suddenly heard a growl that sent shivers down their spine. The two boys took to their heels at once, realizing that it was a lion. In those days, you need not to go far in the thick forest before seeing one. Lions invades homes to carry away animals, even in the presence of people. And so, believe it or not, it stood in front of the boys. Ume was stricken with fear, and so he hurriedly took to his heels, calling Eoha and the entire village for help. Seeing Ume escape, Eoha too followed suit and ran like an antelope. He too was scared, but instead of running to the route leading to the village, he ran towards a tree and quickly climbed when he saw that the lion was gaining ground. Eoha positioned himself properly and aimed at the lion with his double-barrel gun. To stay alive, he has to make a quick decision, and that was to shoot down the lion. The roar teared the air as the lion struggled with his last breath, forcing Eoha to fall from the tree as he collapsed out of fear. Eoha has killed a lion and did not realize it. He has achieved what many strong men was not able to achieve. Being a slave, it was an extra on his side. The huge beast laid just a stone throw from where Eoha was lying when the warrior came, running to the spot with his son. He was peacefully having his lunch when his horrified son dashed in, choking with words, as he tried to narrate their ordeal. And that was how he quickly abandoned his meal and took his gun, and hurriedly ran to the direction of the incident. On reaching the spot, the evil warrior stood still for a moment on realizing what was done. Eoha has killed a lion. Abomination, he uttered. Not when I'm alive, Eoha. At that moment, Onunamba was filled with greed and wickedness. He could not imagine his slave becoming an Ogbwagu, while his son, a freeborn, is nothing. And so, out of greed and covetousness, he hurriedly carried the lion up and beckoned on his son to come closer. Take the gun and sound a signal of the warrior. Why, father? Let's help Eoha first, maybe he's wounded. Ignorant fool, why am I cursed? Why did the gods choose to give me an accursed son like you? Do you realize what's going on? Do you know that as soon as the community realizes that it was the slave and not you, that you've lost your dignity? Dignity, that is all you cared for. He's your son too. I don't want the dignity. May thunder strike you deaf, do as I say, or I'll not blink an eye while sacrificing you to the gods. You're the Ogbwagu, and it stays that way, you weakling. And that was how Onunamba conspired and took what belongs to his slave. He lied and made the people believe it was his son that killed the lion. And as soon as the gun sounded, the warrior assembled to the spot and raised his son to the air, chanting the songs of warriors. Before then, he had quickly gone to wake up Eoha and strictly warned him not to lay a claim. The news quickly spread before they reached home. The ceremony of becoming a titled man has commenced as soon as the lion was brought home, and that was how Ononamba stole the right of his slave. The people doubted it, but what would they say? It was done, and everyone went to their individual businesses. But the gods were angry. Ononamba had desecrated the land severally, but taken what belongs to a helpless slave has topped it all. His cup was eventually full. The time of grace was gone, and the gods decided to put a stop to it. The cry of the slave has awakened their anger, the cry of help and justice. Although Eoha in his journey as a slave was forbidden to show pain, the little lad was taught to take in, at all times, never to cry or show weakness. He grew up quickly. Eoha lost his childhood. He has borne so much pain and grief in his life through his master and has endured, but taking what rightfully belongs to him and shutting him up was too much for him to bear. And so once again, in order not to lose his sanity as a result of sorrow, Eoha has gone into his secret place of grieving and cried out in pain. He remembered his past and his wounds were reopened. He secretly refuses to eat or drink as sorrow tears him apart. Ume, his only friend and master's son, has pleaded for him to eat. "For my sake, eat and stay alive, brother." "If only there's something I can do, Eoha," he has continued pleading. "You're the Ogbuagu and you know it." "Oh, how I wished he wasn't my father," Ume finally said, helplessly staring at Eoha, who has kept crying, and not long his agonizing cry was heard. Few months passed and things looked as if it was forgotten. Once again he's getting away with it, and the gods are silent, until things of terror began to unfold. Ononamba began to lose properties, strange occurrences. His livestock was wiped away in his eyes. Sickness invaded his home, and he was forced to spend, in order to save lives, sleep was taken from their eyes. Strange cries were heard especially at night. Terror invaded his home and was driving him mad. And for the first time in his life, Ononamba became afraid. He was living in fear. He has nightmares upon nightmares. He cannot close his eyes peacefully without screaming out of fear. He was sure the gods are angry, but he hardened his heart and never repented or asked for forgiveness from whom he has wronged. As if what was happening is not enough, Ononamba proceeded to take a wife for his son. To be an Ogbuagu, you must be married. His son is old enough for marriage and nothing is stopping him. He must complete the ritual, and that was what he planned. But on that fateful day, the family woke up with a cry of pain and loss. Ononamba has waited for his son to come out that very morning. It was the day of his marriage, and when he did not see him, he sent one of his daughters. By the way, he had a son and 4 daughters, so Ume was dear to him. The cry from his daughter sent an ugly message to the entire household. As everyone ran towards Ume's hut, there he was lying stiff dead. Some strange marks like that of a lion was all over his body. So Ononamba was broken. The loss of his only son at his old age was the only thing that can break him. He was humbled, but his life was spared. He lived to reap the evil he has sown. His 4 daughters got married, and his family became empty and silent. He was lonely because his ill-gotten wives left him too. But Eoha stayed. When he saw what has befallen the only friend and brother that he has grown to know and love, he was moved with compassion as he watched his master paid dearly for his sin. Ume was the only son of his father, the one to continue his lineage after he's gone. But now, as Ume has met with untimely death, Ononamba's family lineage will be wiped away if Eoha decides to go, because Eoha was set free from his master's grip. Ononamba, in his plea for forgiveness, when his only son suddenly died a mysterious death, has pleaded for mercy. "I will do your biddings, gods of my ancestors," he had cried out. His request was granted, but he was told to set the slave free, and he has no choice but to obey. Eoha stayed, a freeborn, respected, and loved by the community, while his master lived in fear and grew old paying for his sin. The sins of the fathers rests on their children. Do good to leave a good legacy. Love is too massive that it can be shared. The end.